So I wanted to go through really quickly the difference between the extension store and the extension warehouse, because there's been a little bit of confusion to people who are new to installing plugins and things, and for good reason. It is confusing. So I just wanted to kind of go through it really quick and make sure that everybody's on the same page, what the difference between the two are. So the extension store is something that actually was created before the extension warehouse. And the extension store was part of the Sketchucation Forum, which existed outside of Sketchup. It's not a part of Sketchup as far as the corporate entity that's Sketchup. When Google owned Sketchup, they didn't even really acknowledge, they participated a little bit in the forum, but as far as the plugins that were created by the forum members, um, they didn't integrate into SketchUp in any way for a long time. Back when Google owned SketchUp, there wasn't any connection or extension warehouse or anything like that. There was only this forum here, and this is how we installed extensions, and which were called plugins back then, for years and years. And that was through the forum, through Sketchucation.com, going to community, going to forums, and then going down. There's a resources section down here, and there's a plugins section. So within that is all of the plugins that you'll find in the extension store. There are some plugins that are not affiliated with Sketchucation members. So everything pretty much that comes out of the extension store, which you get through this website, are plugins that are created by members of this forum and are stored on this forum. So when you're looking at the extension store, it's really a link to the Sketchucation forum and to this thread specifically where all of the plugins are hosted. And in the old days, when we wanted to download a plugin, we would go to the forum and we would go into the forum thread, and we would go down, and the plugin information would all be there, and then there would always be an option down at the bottom to download the plugin and then to go through and discuss. There I am. This is back in 2011, talking about the plugins and asking questions, talking to the author, and directly communicating with people on the forum. So that was the way that we did things back then, and the ownership of the forum decided, hey, maybe we can write something that will create a bridge essentially from SketchUp back to the forum and allow users to not have to go on the forum, not have to go through the tedious process of searching for the thread, just because of the nature of the forum always moving and things getting bumped down and bumped up. It was really hard to find things. So they came up with the Sketchucation plugin store. There's also this here, which is the last sticky note, I guess they call it here in topics, called plugin index. It has 0 views, but it's the most viewed thread here. And the Sketchucation extension store is really an extension of this one particular thread, which lists all of the plugins that are stored here on the forum through different threads, and each one of these is a link to a different forum thread where that plugin was uploaded. So it's the newly posted ones, the recently updated plugins, and then plugins by author. And again, that's in the community, forums, resources, plugins, and then down under topics, it's the plugin index. So that was a lot harder to get to find things and then go through and put them on your hard drive and then go and install them. So this was the solution then, was the plugin store. So what that does is just connect automatically to their server and their database of plugins and allow you a search feature to go and find them, and then it will auto install them on your computer in your version of SketchUp. So this came first, before the extension warehouse, and this wasn't around until Trimble took over and bought SketchUp, and they started to acknowledge the great work that was done by the community, and now started to integrate that into their idea of what SketchUp is and what it means. Before, I mean, you were unless you were a member on this here, you had Mustard and the plugins that were there, and then you had Sketchucation and the plugins that were there, and there's all those things still out there floating around, and 10 years worth of plugins that were written and updated, but the old ones are still out there. So it got to be a bit of a mess, especially for a new user that wasn't in the mix and keeping up and following along with the progress and checking into the forum daily like a lot of us were. So there's a general overlap, I guess. The extension warehouse is for people who have paid for SketchUp or free users of SketchUp, whatever, that maybe aren't familiar with the forum. So there's some crossover here with a lot of the stuff that's on the forum has become authorized. So anything that's over here in the extension warehouse has been authorized by the company to be included, that works well with the SketchUp program, that's not going to cause any issues or crashes. Things will still cause crashes, but not frequently, or there's no, because sometimes when you write a plugin, there could be it can cause another plugin to stop working. There's some discrepancy there, or some coding that messes up something else. So they've kind of cross-checked things and verified them and allowed them into the extension warehouse. In order to use either one of these, you need to have a password and a username. So with the extension store, you have it here. This little link says register an account. And what you're doing is signing up for the forum. So if you are already signed up for the forum, when you first installed the extension store, it will give you a username and password option. You put your username and password in. So pretty sure everybody's gotten to that point and we're able to get in. You can check there under that little settings button and go through. Here's your profile, and you can see, this would be like forum posts, how many plugins you've downloaded, your likes and your votes of plugins, and you get kind of these behind the scene things of all the things that you're using and have downloaded. And you can also check if your extensions are up to date. And you can go back to the most recent plugin list here. So you have a search bar down at the bottom, and you can log out here. And then there's some other options that come with the extension store, which will allow you to disable plugins if your plugins get too bloated and you're not using something, but you think you might need it once in a while. You can disable it so it doesn't take up room. When you're working, that you have to look through a larger list to find the one thing that you're using over and over again. You can kind of manage things through these two buttons here. The extension warehouse, you need to be installed via your Google account. So if you have a Gmail or you have a YouTube channel, any of those things that are affiliated with Google, you want to use that username and password to sign into the extension warehouse. So that's where it is. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt because now you have two sets of passwords that you're using. But I guess the thinking here with this whole setup is that, and I could be wrong, maybe this was released by Google, which would make sense to why it's connected to your Google account. So maybe it was in the last iteration of SketchUp before Google sold it that they brought this into, they rolled this out from their development phase. So, but you just want to make sure that you're signed in or that you have an account with Google in order to access the extension warehouse. And I guess they can track there what downloads and things that you've done through here. So the difference here, you can search up here. You have the recent plugins. You can search by author here through, and these are all, again, Sketchucation community members who have authored these plugins. There are plugins in the extension store which aren't in the extension warehouse. So I'll find that quite a bit. And I use the extension store almost primarily there will be stuff in the extension warehouse that isn't in the extension store. So if I know something offhand and I need it and I can't find it in one place, I'll go look in the other place. But generally, for speed and I guess just maybe my overall comfort with what I'm used to with participating in the forum for so long and knowing the plugins and the authors a lot better and personally, I tend to lean towards the extension store, but you can do whatever makes you comfortable. Just, I would say the best thing is a mix of both to find what you need. The one thing with the extension store, this little, right after the username, and it's not so obvious here, but there's a little drop down button which gives you a description, version update information, things like that, so you can kind of look at what that plugin is about before you download it, how many other people have downloaded it. And if you click on, if you hover over it, it'll tell you also how many downloads there have been on that particular plugin. So if you install here through the extension store, I'm not sure how this works necessarily on a Mac, but I know on a PC here I just hit install. I have two different locations. One is a custom plugins folder, and I just use the main one here. I guess maybe if you only have one location, it won't pop up this window. So I use the app data roaming location, which kind of allows these plugins to, and some of the things like my keyboard shortcuts are saved there. It allows them to be accessible over multiple versions of SketchUp. Or I guess if you have multiple instances and they're all using a shared roaming folder, they can access the same plugins. So the extension warehouse is set up more. You can search by industry. You can search by developer. If you pull up a plugin through the extension warehouse, there's some information there about that plugin. And I guess probably for a brand new user, it's a little nicer looking the way that it's laid out. This was made by SketchUp and all the money there that allows the funding of that development, whereas this was made by the free community over here. So it may not be as fancy, but this is user driven versus corporate driven over here. So but this is all of the different plugins by this particular author, Thomas Thomason. And in here you use the install button here, and you can kind of click on his name to find other plugins by him. And there's a little commenting section and things like that that you don't have over here in the extension store. So, this sub D plugin, if I go over here, you can see that it's also right here. So if I click here, here's the sub D plugin that's being shown over in the extension warehouse. And this is a commercial plugin. It's, I think, $40. And don't know, that information is not over here. I guess you just install the trial and it lets you know. So there's a lot more information in the extension warehouse, but I think general speed of installing plugins is faster in the extension store. But it's just me, to each their own, personal preference on some of that. But there might be some things that I'm using that you can't find in the extension warehouse. Almost everything that I'm using you will be able to find in the extension store. So there was one other question about the edge tools, and I'm going to search it here as well. I'm going to search it over here just to show kind of both things. So the edge tool 2 here, and then search it over here as well. So in the extension warehouse, there's a video and things, so you don't get that privilege over here. So, I would call the extension store more for advanced users who kind of understand are familiar with the plugins, who follow the forum, things like that. This will give you much more information and link to the author's plugins or the author's videos and explanations. With this plugin over here, you can see there's a requirement going on, which is the TT-lib 2 version 2.7, and you want to install that first. That's a prerequisite. So you would search, kind of go back or click on TomTom's name here, and over here you would have to search for that. So I would go to TT-lib, and I would want to make sure that I install that one first, and that's the library, that's the prerequisite in order for that plugin to actually work. So it has some of the functionality added. It adds the functionality to SketchUp in order to enable that within the when we're using, let's say, the edge inspector, and you get those little blue circles. That's not a native feature of SketchUp. So it's written into this library plugin, some of those extra features. But through here, you would go down and try to find TT-lib here. And it gives you a description here as a library of shared functions used by a variety of other extensions. So a good number of the TomTom plugins or extensions will require this TT-lib as a prerequisite. So if you're going to install things by TomTom, generally install this, or just check for the prerequisite. And it's over here in the extension store as well, TT library, and you can just install that in either location, here or here, depending on which one you're using. And once you have that installed, then you can go back and install the edge tools, and it will have what it needs in order to populate those. If the edge tools don't initially show up as a toolbar after you install TT library first and then edge tool second, and you're still not seeing the toolbar, you need to go to view toolbars, and you need to go down and click it here and just check this box and then hit close, and it will activate that toolbar, which is right here. We'll turn that on. If you do install the TT library, you install the edge tools, and it's not automatically showing up, which I had in the previous video, I had to restart SketchUp for whatever reason in order for that to kind of plug in maybe the tools through the library or whatever in order to get those to register. So that's pretty much both instances here. With installing plugins, you have these two options. I hope I explained them and the difference between them. There's a lot of overlap, which makes them confusing. And I would say maybe for the new user to stick with the extension warehouse and use your Google ID and stuff to sign in. I personally like the extension store because it's faster, but and I kind of am a lot more familiar with the plugins that I use. And I guess as you become more familiar as well, you'll know exactly what you're looking for the next time you update SketchUp and you want to repopulate your plugins. You can go and grab them very quickly because you've been using them every day, and you know offhand what you're missing when you're going to do something. So you just need to remember that some plugins have prerequisites, and the only ones that really have prerequisites are the plugins from TomTom and the plugins from Frito 6. So those are the only two sets of plugins. Those particular authors use a library to help the functionality, and just why their plugins are so powerful, because they extend the functionality of SketchUp in order to support their plugins. So it's a lot more complex, and not many authors go down that road of actually writing their own libraries to accompany their plugins. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. And just want to make sure that everybody is up to speed here and gets everything installed so we can kind of move on collectively. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.